Something is unfolding behind closed doors, and those closest to Prince Harry say it is more serious than anyone realizes. Tonight, concerns are growing that years of pressure have finally pushed him to a breaking point. Sources close to Prince Harry are quietly expressing deep concern about what they describe as a mounting mental health crisis, one that has intensified over recent months as personal, financial, and emotional pressures converge all at once. This is not about ordinary stress. This is not about the struggles he has openly discussed in interviews or in his memoir. According to individuals familiar with his current state, this is different. They describe a man overwhelmed by accumulated setbacks, strained relationships, public criticism, and a growing sense that the life he tried to build outside the royal family is not unfolding as he once imagined. Over the past 5 years, Harry made some of the most dramatic decisions of his life. He stepped away from royal duties, relocated to California, entered major media partnerships, and publicly shared deeply personal grievances about his family and upbringing. At the time, these moves were presented as steps toward freedom, independence, and healing. But today, sources suggest the reality may feel far more complicated. Several major business ventures have ended or failed to meet expectations. High-profile deals that once symbolized a new beginning have either concluded or face uncertainty. Each public setback has not only financial consequences, but emotional ones. Public rejection can cut deeply, especially when the world is watching. Friends reportedly say that the pressure of maintaining a public image while privately dealing with disappointment has become exhausting. Every headline, every online comment, every analysis of his choices adds weight. Public opinion polling in both the United Kingdom and the United States has reflected declining favorability ratings, a sharp contrast to the sympathy he once received. For someone whose identity was long tied to service, military duty, and royal responsibility, this shift in perception can feel destabilizing. Identity, once anchored in clear roles, now appears less certain. At the same time, there are reported strains within his personal life. Rumors and speculation surrounding his marriage continue to circulate. Whether accurate or exaggerated, such speculation itself becomes another stressor. Close relationships are often the strongest source of stability during turbulent times. When those relationships face pressure, the emotional impact can multiply. If the partnership that symbolized a new chapter now carries its own tension, that adds another layer of complexity. Family estrangement remains one of the most painful aspects of the situation. Harry's relationship with his brother has reportedly been distant for years. Communication with his father has also been described as limited, particularly amid ongoing health challenges within the royal family. Estrangement carries a heavy emotional cost. When unresolved conflict lingers, it can intensify feelings of isolation, regret, and helplessness. According to those familiar with the dynamics, this separation weighs heavily on him, particularly during moments when family unity might otherwise provide comfort. Isolation itself is another key factor. Living thousands of miles away from his country of birth, separated from lifelong friends and familiar surroundings, means that his support network looks very different from what it once was. While he has built new connections in California, sources suggest that genuine, long-standing friendships, the kind formed before global fame and controversy, are limited. Experts consistently note that strong social support is one of the most protective factors against severe depression. When that network thins, vulnerability increases. Mental health professionals who speak generally about situations like this explain that crises rarely emerge from a single event. Instead, they form through cumulative stress, repeated disappointments, ongoing criticism, relationship strain, financial pressure, and unresolved trauma stacking on top of one another until coping mechanisms begin to fail. According to individuals who have interacted with Harry recently, signs of withdrawal have become more noticeable. Reduced communication, canceled appearances, limited engagement even with close contacts. While such behavior can have many explanations, withdrawal is often one of the earliest warning signals that someone may be struggling more deeply than they admit. There are also reported expressions of discouragement, phrases reflecting frustration about projects not succeeding, questions about purpose, statements suggesting exhaustion with constant scrutiny. While none of these statements alone confirm a crisis, taken together they paint a picture of someone under extraordinary strain. And strain, when left unaddressed, can intensify quickly. What makes this moment especially concerning, according to those watching closely, is timing. Approaching his 40s, Harry stands at an age when many people naturally reflect on their life direction, achievements, and relationships. Milestones can amplify existing doubts. For someone whose life has unfolded in front of the world, self-reflection can become public judgment. That dynamic can be emotionally overwhelming. It is important to be clear. Concern does not equal confirmed diagnosis. No official statement has declared a medical emergency. However, the consistent message from multiple sources is that people close to him are worried, not about headlines, but about his well-being. They describe a man carrying visible stress, managing disappointment under relentless scrutiny, and confronting personal crossroads without the support structures he once relied upon. Tonight, the central question is not whether Harry has faced criticism. That is evident. The question is whether the accumulation of financial pressure, public backlash, family distance, and personal uncertainty has created a situation that requires urgent attention. Because when stress reaches a breaking point, the consequences can escalate quickly, and those who recognize the warning signs early may be the difference between decline and recovery. This is not entertainment. It is a developing situation involving a public figure who, beneath titles and controversies, remains a human being navigating profound challenges. In the next section, we examine the specific warning signs that have reportedly raised alarms and why mental health experts say those signals should never be ignored. Something is unfolding behind closed doors, and those closest to Prince Harry say it is more serious than anyone realizes. Tonight, concerns are growing that years of pressure have finally pushed him to a breaking point. Now let us look more closely at the specific warning signs that have reportedly raised concern among those who have interacted with Harry in recent weeks. Because recognizing crisis indicators early is often the difference between stabilization and escalation. According to individuals who claim recent contact, one of the most noticeable changes has been withdrawal, not the ordinary desire for privacy that public figures sometimes seek, but a deeper disengagement, reduced communication, delayed responses to messages, canceled commitments without clear explanation. Friends who once had regular contact reportedly say they now struggle to reach him. Withdrawal like this can signal emotional exhaustion, but mental health professionals caution that it can also indicate something more serious. When someone pulls away from even trusted contacts, it may reflect a growing sense of hopelessness or an inability to face conversation. There are also reported shifts in daily routine, irregular sleep patterns, long stretches of inactivity, reduced interest in activities he once valued, including sports and public engagements tied to charitable causes. A noticeable decline in visible enthusiasm. Experts refer to this as loss of interest or inability to feel pleasure, a core symptom of severe depression. When someone begins disengaging from the very activities that once defined their sense of purpose, that is not something to dismiss lightly. Sources also describe moments of visible frustration, expressions of feeling misunderstood, statements reflecting a belief that nothing works, or that every effort results in criticism or failure. While frustration is natural after setbacks, persistent expressions of hopelessness are different. Mental health professionals consistently identify hopelessness as one of the strongest predictors of emotional crisis. When someone begins to believe that improvement is impossible, their motivation to seek help can decline. Another reported concern involves exhaustion, not simply physical tiredness, but emotional depletion. Living under constant public scrutiny can create a sense that there is no safe space. Every action analyzed, every silence interpreted, every decision debated. Over time, that environment can erode resilience. Sources suggest that the weight of public commentary, particularly online, has been heavier than he anticipated when stepping away from royal life. The expectation may have been independence. The reality has included relentless criticism from multiple sides. There is also the factor of unresolved trauma. Harry has openly discussed the impact of losing his mother at a young age and the emotional shutdown that followed. Trauma does not disappear simply because it is acknowledged. In fact, during periods of intense stress, old wounds can resurface. According to those familiar with his reflections, he has reportedly spoken more frequently about childhood memories and feelings tied to loss and abandonment. Mental health experts explain that when current stress activates past trauma, the emotional impact can multiply. Financial pressure, even for individuals with substantial resources, carries psychological consequences. Maintaining a high-profile lifestyle in California requires significant expenditure, security, property maintenance, staff, and operational costs. When business ventures falter or contracts conclude, the uncertainty can generate anxiety about long-term stability. That anxiety may not be about immediate survival, but about control, legacy, and sustainability. For someone accustomed to structured royal funding, navigating independent financial responsibility at this scale can be daunting. Friends reportedly expressed concern that the convergence of these factors, identity confusion, public criticism, relationship strain, financial uncertainty, and unresolved grief, has created what professionals call cumulative stress overload. Each individual stressor might be manageable alone. Together, they create pressure that tests coping mechanisms. There are also quiet concerns about emotional isolation. While he is not physically alone, insiders suggest that emotional isolation can occur even within proximity to others. Being surrounded by staff or acquaintances does not replace having a trusted confidant who challenges, supports, and understands without agenda. Experts emphasize that perceived isolation, the feeling that no one truly understands, can intensify depressive symptoms. Importantly, there have been no confirmed reports of self-harm or hospitalization, but experts stress that waiting for dramatic events before acknowledging warning signs is a mistake. Crisis rarely appears suddenly. It builds gradually. Subtle shifts, changed tone, increased irritability, withdrawal, loss of appetite, or sleep disruption. These are early indicators, and early indicators are opportunities. Those who care about him reportedly face a difficult balance. How do you intervene without overreacting? How do you respect autonomy while recognizing vulnerability? Mental health professionals advise that direct, compassionate conversation is often essential. Asking someone directly if they are struggling does not plant ideas. It opens doors for honesty. Yet many people hesitate, fearing they will intrude. Another complicating factor is public image. For a high-profile individual, admitting severe emotional distress can feel risky. It may invite speculation, market consequences, or renewed media attention. That fear alone can discourage seeking help. The stronger the public persona, the harder it can be to admit private fragility. What makes this moment particularly delicate is the convergence of timing, scrutiny, and identity transition. Harry is no longer a working royal. He is not fully established as a media entrepreneur. He exists in a transitional space, one that may lack clear structure. Humans rely on structure more than they realize. When structure disappears, uncertainty expands. So the question becomes, are these signs temporary reactions to stress or indicators of deeper crisis? Only qualified professionals working directly with him could answer that definitively. But the consistent theme emerging from those expressing concern is urgency. Not panic, not scandal, urgency. Because when withdrawal deepens, when hopeless language increases, and when identity confusion combines with isolation, the risk of escalation grows. And escalation in mental health does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it unfolds quietly, behind gates and closed doors. In the next section, we examine why Harry's personal history may make this period especially vulnerable, and what psychological factors increase risk when stress reaches a breaking point. This is not entertainment. It is a developing situation involving a public figure who, beneath titles and controversies, remains a human being navigating profound challenges. In the next section, we examine the specific warning signs that have reportedly raised alarms, and why mental health experts say those signals should never be ignored. Something is unfolding behind closed doors, and those closest to Prince Harry say it is more serious than anyone realizes. Tonight, concerns are growing that years of pressure have finally pushed him to a breaking point. To understand why this moment is drawing such serious concern, we have to look beyond current headlines and examine Harry's psychological history, because mental health crises do not emerge in isolation. They often connect to patterns that began long before the present moment. Harry was 12 years old when his mother died suddenly in a global tragedy watched by millions. At that age, grief can be confusing, overwhelming, and deeply destabilizing. He has spoken openly about suppressing his emotions for years, about shutting down rather than processing pain. Mental health research consistently shows that childhood trauma, especially the sudden loss of a parent, can leave long-lasting vulnerabilities. Trauma does not always show itself immediately. It can remain dormant until triggered by later life stress. When current pressures resemble past emotional wounds, the brain reacts strongly. Feelings of abandonment, rejection, or public humiliation can echo earlier experiences of loss. According to professionals who specialize in trauma, this layering effect increases intensity. What might appear to outsiders as ordinary disappointment can internally feel catastrophic if it activates unresolved grief. There is also the factor of identity disruption. Harry's identity for most of his life was clearly defined. He was a prince, a soldier, a working royal with structured duties and institutional support. That structure shaped daily routine, social network, and long-term purpose. When he stepped away from royal life, he did so with the intention of building a new identity, independent, entrepreneurial, private, yet influential. But identity reconstruction is not simple. It requires time, stability, and consistent success to reinforce the new narrative. When ventures face criticism or fail to meet expectations, the new identity can feel fragile. Psychologists explain that losing one identity without fully securing another creates what is called identity diffusion, a state of uncertainty about who one is and where one belongs. Identity diffusion often correlates with anxiety and depression. Another vulnerability involves impulsive decision-making under stress. Throughout his adult life, Harry has made several major life choices during periods of emotional intensity. Experts note that when individuals tend to act decisively during stress without fully processing long-term consequences, they may later confront unexpected fallout. That fallout can generate regret, and regret, when combined with public scrutiny, can deepen distress. Support systems are critical protective factors in mental health. Historically, Harry had access to close family bonds, long-term friendships, and institutional backing. Over recent years, many of those connections have fractured. Estrangement from immediate family members reduces emotional safety nets. Geographical relocation separates him from lifelong peers. While new relationships can form, they rarely replicate decades-old trust quickly. Mental health professionals consistently identify social support as one of the strongest buffers against severe depression. When support networks shrink, vulnerability rises. It does not mean crisis is inevitable, but it does mean that stress carries greater impact. There is also the matter of public transparency. Harry has shared personal struggles in interviews in his memoir. While openness can be therapeutic, it also reopens wounds. Recounting trauma publicly invites commentary, some supportive, some critical. Repeated exposure to criticism regarding personal pain can create secondary stress. Instead of healing quietly, recovery becomes a public spectacle. Approaching midlife can also intensify self-evaluation. Many individuals, regardless of status, reassess accomplishments around this stage. Questions arise. What have I built? What relationships remain strong? What legacy am I shaping? If answers feel uncertain or disappointing, emotional strain increases. For someone whose life trajectory shifted dramatically at a global scale, those reflections may be magnified. Another important consideration is resilience fatigue. Over time, even resilient individuals can become worn down if challenges persist without relief. Continuous adaptation, relocating countries, renegotiating professional roles, navigating media battles, addressing legal disputes requires psychological energy. If recovery periods are short and stressors continuous, coping capacity declines. Experts also warn about cognitive narrowing during depressive episodes. When someone becomes depressed, their thinking patterns can shift toward negativity and self-blame. Achievements feel minimized. Failures feel exaggerated. Future possibilities appear limited. This distorted perception can trap individuals in cycles of hopelessness. It becomes difficult to imagine positive change, even when change is possible. Importantly, none of these factors alone guarantee crisis. Many people experience trauma, identity shifts, public criticism, and financial setbacks without reaching breaking point. What makes this situation concerning, according to those observing, is the convergence of vulnerabilities and current stressors at the same time. Trauma history, identity disruption, social isolation, public scrutiny, business setbacks, relationship uncertainty, family estrangement. These layers combine into what professionals describe as compounded risk. Compounded risk increases the importance of timely intervention. Intervention does not mean dramatic headlines. It can mean structured therapy, consistent psychiatric evaluation, temporary withdrawal from public commitments, medication adjustments, and deliberate rebuilding of support networks. But intervention requires recognition, either self-recognition or recognition by those close enough to observe changes. And here lies the critical question: is recognition happening quickly enough? Because when someone with historical trauma and reduced support begins showing signs of withdrawal and hopelessness, waiting too long can allow symptoms to deepen. In the next section, we examine what specific intervention options exist, how crisis is typically managed at this level, and what could happen if warning signs are ignored. In the next section, we examine why Harry's personal history may make this period especially vulnerable, and what psychological factors increase risk when stress reaches a breaking point. This is not entertainment. It is a developing situation involving a public figure who, beneath titles and controversies, remains a human being navigating profound challenges. In the next section, we examine the specific warning signs that have reportedly raised alarms, and why mental health experts say those signals should never be ignored. Something is unfolding behind closed doors, and those closest to Prince Harry say it is more serious than anyone realizes. Tonight, concerns are growing that years of pressure have finally pushed him to a breaking point. When someone begins showing signs of severe emotional distress, mental health professionals emphasize one principle above all others: early intervention saves lives. The longer symptoms intensify without structured support, the greater the risk of escalation. So what does intervention actually look like in a situation like this? The first and most important step is assessment. A qualified mental health professional must evaluate the severity of symptoms, level of depression, presence of suicidal thoughts, substance use concerns, functional impairment, and immediate safety risks. Without proper assessment, assumptions can be dangerously wrong. Crisis is not measured by headlines. It is measured by clinical evaluation. If symptoms are moderate but manageable, structured outpatient treatment may be appropriate. This can include multiple therapy sessions per week, psychiatric evaluation for medication, and close monitoring by trusted individuals. Antidepressant medication, when prescribed appropriately, can help stabilize mood. However, medication takes time to work. It is not an instant solution. During that waiting period, support systems become even more critical. If symptoms are severe, particularly if there are thoughts of self-harm or inability to function, more intensive care may be required. Voluntary hospitalization allows someone to enter a safe, supervised environment where professionals can stabilize mood, adjust medications, and remove immediate risks. For public figures, this option can feel daunting due to privacy concerns, but safety must outweigh image. In cases where someone is deemed an immediate danger to themselves and unwilling to seek help, California law permits a 72-hour involuntary psychiatric hold. This is not punishment. It is emergency protection. It exists to prevent irreversible decisions during temporary psychological crisis. While there is no public confirmation that such measures are being considered, experts stress that the possibility of escalation must never be ignored. There is also the issue of access to means. When someone experiencing severe depression has access to potentially lethal tools, including firearms for personal security, risk increases significantly. Mental health professionals routinely advise temporary removal of such access during crisis periods. It is a precaution, not an accusation. The goal is to reduce impulsive harm. Another area of concern is substance use. Harry has previously spoken about past struggles with alcohol and experimentation with drugs during periods of emotional pain. While there are no confirmed reports of current abuse, experts warn that crisis often tempts individuals to self-medicate. Alcohol may numb pain temporarily, but it intensifies depression chemically. It lowers inhibition. It increases impulsivity. In moments of despair, those effects can become dangerous. In the next section, we examine why Harry's personal history may make this period especially vulnerable, and what psychological factors increase risk when stress reaches a breaking point. This is not entertainment. It is a developing situation involving a public figure who, beneath titles and controversies, remains a human being navigating profound challenges. In the next section, we examine the specific warning signs that have reportedly raised alarms, and why mental health experts say those signals should never be ignored. Something is unfolding behind closed doors, and those closest to Prince Harry say it is more serious than anyone realizes. Tonight, concerns are growing that years of pressure have finally pushed him to a breaking point.